Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the second public hearing of the Joint Select Committee on Finance and Legal Affairs, pursuant to the committee's inquiry into the accessibility, responsiveness, and service delivery performance of the National Insurance Board of Trinidad and Tobago. I am Dr. Marlene Atz, an independent senator in the 13th Parliament of Trinidad and Tobago and chair of the Joint Select Committee on Finance and Legal Affairs. Before I begin, permit me to repeat the justification for this inquiry. The National Insurance Board of Trinidad and Tobago, familiarly known as NIB, plays a vital role in ensuring social protection and income security for workers and their families through the administration of the National Insurance System, familiarly known as the NIS. The NIB's services encompasses the registration of employers and employees, collection of contributions, and the processing and payment of various benefits, including retirement, sickness, and maternity benefits. Over the past several years, however, public concerns have intensified regarding the quality and responsiveness of NIB's customer service and operational efficiency. According to the Ombudsman's 45th report in 2022, the board recorded 177 new complaints, nearly double the previous year's number, making it the public body with the highest number of complaints. These persistent challenges have eroded public trust and confidence in the NIB and have raised broader concerns about the adequacy of internal systems, human resource capacity, and technological infrastructure. This inquiry, therefore, seeks to examine the underlying factors affecting the NIB's service delivery performance, assess its accessibility and responsiveness to the public, and identify measures to strengthen its institutional accountability, transparency, and customer satisfaction. Members of the public are invited to submit their comments on the Parliament's social media platforms, the YouTube channel ParlView, or via Facebook and X, formerly Twitter. You're also invited to follow us on Instagram and Facebook at the handle @TT Parl Committees for real-time updates and highlights from the committee meetings. I will now ask the representatives of the NIBTT, through its Executive Director, Ms. Nyala Persad-Poliah, to introduce herself and her team. And then I will invite the Chairman of the National Insurance Appeal Tribunal to introduce herself. And I will then also invite our representative from the Ministry of Finance to introduce herself. So over to the Executive Director of the NIBTT.
Good morning, Chairman and members. My name is Nyala Persad-Poliah, and I'm the Executive Director of the NIB.
Hello, good morning. My name is Amanda Fulchan-Lakhan, and I'm the Executive Manager of Technology.
Good morning, everyone. I am Michelle Carrington, Chairman of the National Insurance Appeals Tribunal.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Prakash Ramlochan. I'm the Acting Registrar of the National Insurance Appeals Tribunal.
Good morning, everyone. I am Chintamani Suku, the Executive Director, Investment Divestment.
Of the Ministry of Finance, yes, okay. And I think we have two other colleagues from the NIBTT.
Good morning. I am Sean Waldron, the Executive Manager, Insurance Operations, Acton.
Good morning. I am Aisha Khan, the Executive Manager of Human Resources.
Thank you so much. And if I may invite the committee members, starting with Senator Dan Paul to my left.
Good morning, everyone. Vishnu Dan Paul, member.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Satyakama Miraj, member and vice chairman.
Good morning, everyone. Rishati Tran, member.
Good morning, everyone. Brian Manning, member of Parliament.
Good morning, everyone. Leroy Batiste, member.
Thank you so much. Again, for our listening, viewing audience, the purpose of this inquiry is simply to elucidate a number of matters that we think are important to the people of Trinidad and Tobago, particularly given the importance of the National Insurance Board and, by extension, the National Insurance Appeal Tribunal. So with that in mind, I'd like the opportunity just to repeat the inquiry objectives, what we're seeking to do through this process. There are 4 primary objectives of the inquiry, the first of which is to evaluate the efficiency and effectiveness of the NIB's service delivery systems, the NIB's administrative processes, and its client interface mechanisms, as these relate to the delivery of its core services such as benefit claims, registration, and contribution management. The second objective is to identify operational constraints, capacity limitations, and systemic gaps that may affect service delivery, accessibility, and customer experience, including issues related to staffing, technology, records management, and interagency coordination. The third objective is to assess the extent to which the existing digital transformation initiatives have improved service delivery performance at the NIB, and to identify any constraints affecting full implementation. And finally, we would wish through this inquiry to consider whether the current service delivery arrangements adequately address the needs of vulnerable groups, including retirees, persons with disabilities, and persons with limited digital access. I now wish to invite the Executive Director of the NIB, Mrs. Niala Persad-Poliah, to make some brief opening remarks. But before handing over to Mrs. Persad-Poliah, I wish to thank the NIBTT for their submissions following our last inquiry. So over to you.
Madam Chairman, honorable members, good morning, and thank you again for the opportunity to reappear before the committee. The NIB welcomes this engagement and reaffirms its commitment to accountability, transparency, and continuous improvement in the delivery of public services. We recognize that the matters under examination by this committee, particularly claims processing timelines, customer service, and the pace of digital transformation, are issues of significant importance to the citizens of Trinidad and Tobago. We therefore approach this discussion with openness, accountability, and a commitment to delivering sustainable improvements. Chairman, allow me to place the scale of our operations and the imperative for transformation into context. On average, the NIB receives and processes approximately 40,000 claims annually. While most claims are completed within established service standards, we acknowledge that this has not been the experience of all our customers. There are instances where processing times fall short of expectations, access to services may be constrained, and customers have expressed concerns regarding the timeliness of service delivery. We recognize these concerns and remain committed to addressing them. In addition, the organization receives approximately 480,000 records each month from employers. These records currently require significant manual intervention for processing, validation, and correction of errors. The scale and complexity of this paper-based workload underscores the need for modernized processes and technology-enabled solutions. Many of the challenges facing the organization, Chairman, are linked to long-standing structural limitations, including legacy technology, paper-based records, highly manual processes, and dependencies on external stakeholders and agencies. Addressing these constraints require more than operational adjustments. It requires transformational change. That transformational change is being delivered through Project Empower. Project Empower is a strategic modernization program designed to fundamentally redesign the way NIB operates and serves its stakeholders. Phases 1 and 2 successfully delivered in August and September 2024, strengthened the organization's internal capabilities through the implementation of a modern human capital management system and an integrated financial management platform. The next phase of this program will focus directly on improving the customer and employer experience through digital claim processing, self-service capabilities, real-time tracking of requests, online payments, automated validation of submissions, improved access to compliance services, and modernized customer management systems. These enhancements are intended to reduce processing times, improve accessibility, and provide a more efficient and responsive service to the public. This, Chairman, is the vision of Empower. It is not simply a technology initiative. It is a transformation of how the NIB delivers service, enhances accountability, and meets the evolving expectations of the people of Trinidad and Tobago. Our focus remains clear: to provide services that are faster, more accessible, more transparent, and better aligned to the needs of our customers, employers, and beneficiaries. The NIB remains committed to ensuring that this transformation continues to be delivered in a structured, accountable, and sustainable manner for the benefit of future generations and contributors and beneficiaries. Chairman, we look forward to assisting the committee in its deliberations and responding to your questions, and I thank you.
Thank you so much for that very comprehensive opening salvo, and it does lead us nicely into the conversation we're going to have today about the Empower project. But before we delve deeply into that, I would like to invite Ms. Carrington, the chairman of NIAT, the National Insurance Appeals Tribunal, to make some brief opening remarks.
Chairman, members of the public. The National Insurance Appeals Tribunal is an independent body under the Ministry of Finance. It hears and resolves appeals from persons who are not satisfied with decisions made by the National Insurance Appeals Tribunal in respect of applications for benefits such as retirement, maternity, sickness, etc. The tribunal is overseen by an independent chairman and 3 members, 1 from government, 1 from union, and 1 from business. Hearings are generally conducted in North, South, and Tobago, and an individual has approximately 1 year from the date of NIBTT's decision to file an appeal through the National Insurance Appeals Tribunal. Upon receipt of the appeal, the registrar would request from NIBTT in writing the basis of the decision made. The tribunal will subsequently schedule a hearing where facts and documents are reviewed, persons are cross-examined, and decisions taken by members of the tribunal. The National Insurance Appeal Tribunal acts as that first line of adjudication between the appellant and the National Insurance Appeal Board, seeking to provide timely determination of appeals based on openness, fairness, and impartiality in keeping with international standards for Social Security appeals machinery. Today, we look forward to the recommendations and suggestions coming out of this session that may positively impact the citizens of TNT. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Carrington, and again, I appreciate the information provided. Just before we dive into the heart of the inquiry, so to speak, I just wish to remind both committee members and the officials who are with us today to direct your questions and concerns through the chair. I also wish to remind all in the room that since we are live streaming, kindly activate your microphone when you wish to make a contribution, and also use this opportunity to silence your phone so that we don't have any feedback disturbing the live feed. And if I may use the chair's prerogative, and I'd like to start with Ms. Carrington. Based on, in your opening comments, you made the point that members of the public have 1 year after the decision from NIBTT to lodge an appeal with the with the tribunal, the National Insurance Appeals Tribunal. If I may use that as the opportunity to segue into a question to you, and I know a lot of the conversation today is going to be around Empower because that's what we agreed on the last occasion, but based on your opening remarks, if I can ask you to share with our viewing and listening public, and I have to say that people have been tuning in because we do have some questions that I need to pose based on submissions that came in from members of the public. So the committee is now familiar with the mandate and responsibility of the National Insurance Appeals Tribunal. And Ms. Carrington, if you could outline for the benefit of the listening and viewing public, the tribunal's core role and functions within the national insurance system. How are members of the public meant to distinguish between those matters that fall within the jurisdiction of the Appeals Tribunal, or what they should direct to the Office of the Ombudsman, and how, if in any way, do the functions of the National Insurance Appeals Tribunal overlap with that of the Office of the Ombudsman? Because in my opening statement, I would have pointed to the number of matters that went before the Ombudsman that were related to the function of the National Insurance Board. So if for the purposes of clarifying where does one end, where does one begin, how does the public know which one they go to, whether they go to the Ombudsman or whether they come to the Appeals Tribunal?
That actually is pretty a good question, because I think there needs to be a lot of clarity in the public space to treat with that. While the National Insurance Appeals Tribunal, we'll call it NIBTT for ease of reference, NIBTT allows persons or accepts appeals within a statutory time frame. So you have 6 months legally and then 6 months with permission. So the law says you need to submit that appeal 6 months from the date of decision, but then the chairman has the option where the persons provide cause to accept it a further 6 months late. That's why I said a year legally. The Ombudsman Office, on the other hand, there is no time frame within which you can raise an issue, so you can go anytime. I would suggest to persons, one, they take note of the date of the NIB's decision so that the appeal can be timely. Because if the appeal comes to the tribunal outside of that statutory time frame, our hands are tied and we can't rule on it.
If I may, I want to be a little persnickety on this point. The date of the approval. So if I get a document that has a date of July the 2nd, but I receive it in September, and we know sometimes these things happen. It's not an indictment in any way of the NIB. Sometimes these things happen. So it may get to me by snail mail in September or October or November or December. It is the date of the communication.
Again, another excellent point, and one that comes to us all the time. NIB's position when matters come before us, that the date of the decision is the date the check or the benefit was issued to the appellant. We have had cases where persons would have received documents postmarked a particular date after. So particularly where you look at things that are disallowed. If something is disallowed, there's nothing going to the appellant's personal banking account. So then you rely on the postmarked date. But again, the legislation, I think, requires, and I humbly suggest it needs some amendment to treat with what is treated as served as. Because, for instance, in another place where I started in revenue, you have a number of days for local delivery and a number of days for overseas delivery. That is absent in this legislation.
And I want to put, thanks for that clarification, I want to put on notice to the NIB, when we start the conversation around Empower, how will Empower persons to have greater comfort in terms of that date of a decision? Is Empower likely to be more efficient? So am I likely to receive an email in a shorter time frame, or is it going to be the same issue? So I want to park that as a question in terms of Empower, because Empower is meant to bridge that gap and to close those kinds of delays, because it is now a digital platform. And I am simply throwing that out there. that if it's digital, it's likely to be a little more efficient in terms of the timeliness. So I'm parking that question there when we start on the Empower. But back to you, Ms. Carrington, in terms of, so you're saying that someone who receives this document or this decision on whatever date that decision is dated, they have that 6-month window to file with the appeals tribunal. And when does the person then go to the ombudsman? Is it that the NIBTT is the first port of call? Again, for clarity for our listening and viewing public, so that they better understand how all of these institutions are connected and where they really would want to go and make their appeal, or to lodge their appeal, or to raise some question, as it were.
If an individual wants to have access to the full suite of appeal process all the way going to the high courts, then it would make sense you go through the tribunal, because we first need to issue a decision whether we're in agreement with NIBTT or whether we allow the appeal. So if that person wants the opportunity to go before the courts, then they need to come through the Trinidad, to the tribunal. But there should be no reason why a person decides not to go through the Ombudsman Office. We have a number of matters that are still before us that we get queries from the Ombudsman Office. Sometimes we are waiting on the appellant themselves to submit third-party information. Sometimes we are waiting on a response from NIBTT in terms of the basis of the decision. And then we have other things that impact the ability to schedule a hearing in a timely fashion that a person may feel aggrieved and go straight through the Ombudsman Office.
All right, okay. Again, I would park NIBTT in terms of the tribunal's process. Let me park that for a moment. Thanks for the clarity in terms of how persons can come in, and that distinction between the date of a decision as opposed to the date on which the appellant or the beneficiary might have received the notice. I now wish to invite the NIB through Mrs. Persad-Poliah to share with us some greater detail on the Empower project. Sorry, I see Committee Member Batiste wanting.
Chair, just through you, I just wondered if a person may appeal to NIBTT. NIBTT may have made a decision on it. Is it at all part of process that a person might, after receiving a decision from NIBTT, they can go to the Ombudsman? And would NIBTT take the view of the Ombudsman at all in any consideration?
Good follow-up. Thank you, Member Batiste.
And thanks for the question. Once a decision is made by the tribunal, the decision is not varied. You can go to the courts in that case. Yeah? You can go to the Ombudsman Office, but the decision of the tribunal stands.
So in that case, the Ombudsman will almost be locked out of the process. It has no role. NIBTT, no,
it doesn't stop the person from going to the Ombudsman Office and the Ombudsman's Office directing the query through NIBTT, because remember, that is the institution that would make the change or the necessary amendment. Right? I can give you a simple example. Retirement. Although you may...
Member Batiste, if I can ask you to turn off your mic, I'm getting some feedback.
Yeah. Retirement. Person made an application for retirement benefit. They would have had alternative evidence. It would have been submitted in a timely manner, and the tribunal ruled, and there were additional contributions captured, so you got an enhanced retirement benefit. But then you have the other scenario where the person had alternative evidence, but it was submitted outside of that statutory window. The tribunal hands are tied. Generally, what we have seen is NIBTT will still accommodate it. They would still, because retirement, my understanding is there's no time in terms of when they would stop accepting alternative evidence if it's presented to NIBTT. But you have many persons who may go to the Ombudsman Office in that case. So the Ombudsman Office can simply redirect that person to NIBTT to have it addressed. Yeah?
Two quick questions that I wanted to ask. First, if there is any comment from NIBTT in terms of what the tribunal has shared, and the second point that I wanted to raise was in terms of the 6 months and that whole question around the date of the decision, whether this is something that the tribunal thinks might be worthy of legislative review in terms of that 6 months period, because the reality, I think the unspoken reality, is that the date of the decision might be communicated in terms of the person receiving that decision several months later for all sorts of reasons, in terms of feelings, in terms of the delivery process, etc. So whether or not there might be an opportunity, it might be a valid appeal that the person may have, but the 6 months window, because of that date on which the decision is given, whether this is something that we might want to look at legislatively, and then if I can ask the NIB to comment on what has been stated in terms of the tribunal's contribution.
I am not sure so much that the issue is the 6-month window. I think it's the communication of the decision and what we consider a decision, because many times a person may receive a retirement pension, a lump sum. You get your lump sum in the bank and you start getting your monthly contribution. But you may be unaware of the date it first hit your account. So you have that happening. Then you have the fact that where the claim is disallowed, let's say an invalidity benefit or a sickness benefit, and it's disallowed, and that communication from NIBTT, as you correctly said, sometimes go astray, never arrives at the appellant's home. So I think it's really about service of that notice, of that decision, because time and time again, persons receive their retirement benefit, and this one I harp on in particular, because this is the one that comes to us most. They have no idea what their retirement benefit is determined on, because they fail to receive the communication. And that communication is the decision. I should know on what basis my retirement benefit was calculated, whether I ended up with 1,000 or 2,000. You know, you really should know. So that I think what needs to be fixed is the machinery for the delivery of the decision so that persons can act in a timely manner. I also think part of the process, and I believe NIBTT have, and they may speak on this, they have a process where persons appeal. So persons sometimes have this conversation with NIBTT. So they were told the claim is disallowed, and they will be back and forth with the counter clerk, and no one there say to them, you have a 6-month window within which to file a legal appeal with the National Insurance Appeals Tribunal. So by the time this person is back and forth, disputing something, the 6 months has passed, and by the time it comes to us, our hands are tied. So those kinds of things are some of the things we need. It may be process as opposed to legislative amendment, I'm thinking.
Thanks for that distinction. And again, to our listening and viewing public, having a conversation with a customer service representative at the NIB office is not the same as appealing a decision. All right? If I'm to understand what Ms. Carrington is saying correctly, that is not the same as appealing. So to say that you've been to the office 10 times and you talk to the girl in front or the gentleman in front, that is not an appeal. If you wish to appeal a decision with which you're unhappy, or you think that your particular query has not been served, please follow the appropriate procedures by filing an appeal with the National Insurance Appeals Tribunal. So saying that you went to the office 20 times is not an appeal. All right? And I think that is something that needs to be clear, and I think Ms. Carrington wishes to reinforce that point.
Yes, because there is a box, and we have boxes within all NIBTT offices. Suffice it to say, sometimes they're in a corner, but there's a box there for members of the public to lodge their appeals. All right, so that it is important, and it could also, there's a form, the forms are available together with the box. So you could complete the form and drop it off, and our registrar would visit the offices on a timely basis to collect those forms. So I just want to remind persons, it's not just about having a conversation with the person at the counter, as you rightly said.
Okay. Thanks for that, Ms. Carrington. Mrs. Persad-Poliah, I know you wanted to weigh in on the conversation.
Thank you, Chairman. I just wanted to share that the National Insurance Appeals Tribunal is an independent body, and it was established really to address claimants who are aggrieved by the decisions of the board. The timeline or the time frame for filing a claim is legislative, in that it is in our legislation. So if there are any adjustments there, we'll have to have an amendment. And with respect to claimants, once a claim is determined, we would provide our claimants with allowance or disallowance notices. Those are, if we do have an email address on file, it is emailed to the person. Generally, it is posted. But I'm happy to share that Empower will also resolve that because they're, of course, Empower, and we will speak to that when you're in terms of our customer management information and what we'll be asking the public to provide to allow for us to have channels to communicate with the public.
Okay, thanks for that. And before I get to the Empower, I see Member Baptiste's eagerly wants to ask a follow-up question.
I view it as a system, a whole system. We have NIB and then you have NIBTT. I wonder if NIB will advise a would-be claimant that a decision has been made, but that the option to appeal is available to them, so that the counter clerk points the person almost immediately to the fact that they can appeal that decision. Because I'm concerned of the idea of it being independent, and I agree it's independent. But I heard the remark of it being somewhere in the corner of the box for NIBTT. And my concern is that for the person to be advised of their rights, and from a customer service perspective, that the person to do so almost immediately upon a decision, it appears to me, it falls to NIBTT to advise the would-be customer of the next step if they agree with that decision. Your view.
So, Chair, just two things. One, NIBTT addresses matters of fact. Matters of fact are dealt with by the tribunal. Matters of law actually go further to the High Court. So the claimants must also be, the public needs to also be aware of that.
If you can just clarify again for our listening and viewing public distinction between matters of fact and...
My understanding is that the NIBTT addresses matters of fact and matters of law are addressed by the High Court.
So what would be an example of a matter of fact? Remember, we're speaking to persons who may not all appreciate the distinction. So if you can give an example of what is a matter of fact. So someone is listening there and they're trying to figure out, well, is my matter a matter of fact? Because I've been to the office up to this morning and they didn't tell me anything about any tribunal. So
I will ask my head of insurance operations to guide on that. But matters of fact, for example, will probably be if there's a dispute in terms of the number of contributions that one has. A matter of law might very well be an issue of insurability. Is this a true employer-employee relationship? That may very well be a matter of law. Sean, is there anything you would like to add?
Some clarity, yes. I think our population would welcome some clarity, yes?
Yes, it is correct. So the matter of fact would be information that the claimant could provide in addition when the decision is made. So a claimant may come in with a job letter that they were found or a TD4 to outline periods that may have been missing. Those could be presented and those would be accepted by NIBTT. Matter of law may be a situation where it comes down to a workplace injury or something that has to be decided upon in a court of law. So documentation that could prove any missing periods or something that could aid in the decision making could be presented and NIBTT would accept and we would have the discussion and the matter would be discussed.
Chair, I just also wanted to advise, I know Member Baptiste had asked about whether we advise our customers We do. In our disallowance notices, we do share in the disallowance notice that if you are aggrieved by this decision, that you can appeal it. And I take note of the comment with respect to the placement of the appeal boxes, and we will address that, Chairman.
You read my mind because I did note the box, and in 2026, I think we would like to elevate in terms of the avenues and the opportunities available for members of the public to lodge concerns. I want to revisit. I should have said from the outset, there seems to have been a lot of interest generated on the last occasion in terms of the conversation we were having, and I wanted us to close off on the funeral grants conversation that we had at length on the last occasion. And for the benefit of the listening and viewing public, we're happy to report that the NIB was responsive to our request for a written submission in terms of the funeral grant application process and any safeguards, and trying to address persons who may not have the requisite identification cards and, some of the other, and they were non-bankable persons, etc. So for the purposes of the listening and viewing public for whom the funeral grants conversation might have resonated in one way or another, if I can ask the NIBTT to simply recap for us, based on the submission that was sent in, what are the steps for persons to access the funeral grant. Quite a detailed document was sent us, so if we can ask you just to summarize that succinctly for the benefit of the listening and viewing population, so that there is that additional clarity and we can close off on that conversation in terms of the funeral grant.
Chairman, I'm happy to. So who can apply for the benefit? The funeral grant benefit can be applied for by a spouse, a relative, a friend, an employer, any trusted person. What are the requirements for the benefit? The person or the deceased person must have made a minimum of 25 contributions in the system, or he or she ought to have been in receipt of an employment injury benefit at the time, or would have been entitled to receive employment injury benefit, but for the fact of death. In terms, Chairman, of the documentation that is required, of course, we will need an original death certificate, the invoice or the receipt from the funeral home, the national insurance number, if available, of the deceased person, an original and a copy of a valid picture ID for the person who is making the application, and the completed funeral grant application form, which is NI-8. Chair, you would have, I know that there was a question that arose at the last hearing relative to persons who didn't have a valid ID card. For persons applying for a funeral grant and who are not currently with a valid identification card, we do provide for exceptions. So, of course, if our first ask would be whether the person can obtain a valid ID, so we would give a little bit of time in terms of whether the person can apply for a valid ID, because they will still be within time to apply for the grant. And if that is not a possibility, then we would accept alternative documentation, Chairman, such as a birth certificate for the applicant, coupled with an affidavit, and of course the expired identification card as proof to advance the application.
Thank you for that. And just a follow-on question. Is this, so in terms of the detailed response that was provided to the committee, is this information available on your website or anywhere where persons, or do you have plans, how do you plan to disseminate this information to persons so that there is a clarity around the process?
Chairman, the information is available on our website. We also have brochures available at all our offices. Our forms and information is available on the website.
All right, okay, thank you. I think Minister Batiste had a follow-up question.
Yeah. Chair, just one point on the previous issue. I heard the Executive Director of NIB made a point about law versus fact. My concern is that the CSR, I don't think a CSR will have to make a determination on whether the decision of NIB was based on law or fact. So that based on the date of the appeal being so important, it seems to me NIB should be, if there's a decision, the CSR should advise the claimant of their rights to an appeal. At any stage when the person approaches NIAT, they could be, and they assess the facts. They will, at that stage, the issue of whether it's an appeal that could be addressed by NIAT or is something that has to be pursued in court could be determined. But the idea is to protect the date. I don't think no CSR will be engaging in making a determination as to whether the issue is one of fact or law.
Or one of law, yeah.
Who is where the claimant would be engaging.
And you also wouldn't wish to, just to follow on that, you also wouldn't wish to compromise the CSR because the claimant would, in their period of distress trying to deal with a particular matter, will then say, well, this is the information the person gave to me. I know Ms. Carrington wants to weigh in on that.
Well, certainly. I think we have a significant number of appeals that come before us that are what we call mixed fact and law. And in those instances, we would generally disallow the claim. Well, first off, we would have the conversation with the appellant, and we do oftentimes ask them to withdraw. Where they determine not to withdraw, some of them still ask an opportunity to be heard, and we give them an opportunity to be heard. In some instances, they may come with issues of fact, because it isn't always just an employee. The ED would have given a good example of mixed fact and law being the employer-employee relationship. But sometimes you have things as determination of where an injury took place, as the appeals manager would have given that statement. But then you have cases for survivors' benefit and a number of things that persons are required to bring in documentation in support of the claim that they are making or the appeal that they are making. But once we determine it's mixed fact and law, we most times would ask them to withdraw, and if not, we disallow the appeal, and we concur with NIBTT's position. Okay, but we do then advise them that they can take the matter to the courts. To the courts. Yeah.
Thanks for that clarification, both Mrs. Persad-Poliah and Ms. Carrington, and I think it provides the perfect opportunity for us to segue into Empower, because so far we've been talking about the manual systems, these letters being sent out, the discretion of the customer service representative to suggest that you fill out an appeal, et cetera, et cetera. And Project Empower is meant to help us navigate some of those challenges. So was that a question, Member Citron, or after? Okay. So I now would like to ask, and I know our listening and viewing public is probably wondering, what is this Empower thing that we're talking about? So I now want to give you the opportunity to share with us briefly some insight into Empower and this digitization process that NIB has embarked on, and how it is meant to help address those challenges and those kinks in the system that we've been discussing on the last occasion and again this morning. So over to you, Mrs. Persad-Poliah.
That's okay, Chairman. Thank you again. So, Chair, as I would have said in my opening, the Empower project is really an organization, enterprise-wide digital transformation initiative. So this is not a technology project. It is intended to change how we serve, how we operate, and it will positively impact the nation. And Chair, I can share the benefits of the Empower program by giving you examples of what happens right now. As you're aware, even with the matters that we're dealing with right now, we operate with 14 service centers, and yes, our CSRs are all frontline staff. And as I would have said, we accept close to 40,000 applications for claims applications every month, or about 4,000 a month, right? 40,000 a year. What happens now, Chair, is that our customers are required to go onto our website, obtain an appointment, and wait for that appointment to then walk into the service center and treat with it on a paper base. So they bring in an application, it is on a form, they wait in the line. Of course, it's challenging, they submit that, and then the actual process is a paper-based trail. So from this application, it is placed into a brown manila file. It then transfers from desk to desk, and in some cases, office to office, to be able to move this to a point of determination, processing, and payment. With respect to our short-term claims, that takes approximately 30 days, 30 working days. And for our long-term claims, which the public would really be interested in terms of retirement grants and retirement applications, those take approximately 90 working days. Is the best that we can do right now with the manual system. That's from a claimant's point of view. And I would have shared before that from our employers, we serve approximately 14,000 employers and average 500,000 insured persons. And every month, Chair, on the 15th of every month, our employers also come into our service centers. And they come with what is called the 184 forms and the 187 forms, along with a check. Those forms contain records of employees that are employed with them. It is transferred over the counter, the money goes into the bank, well, 2 weeks later, because it's a check, so the money is going to the bank, and then this record then goes into what is called a back office operations for manual uploading onto the system. So I set the context for you, Chairman, because it's an operation that we have been happening.
And I'm tired just listening to it because it sounds extremely tedious. It sounds extremely tedious.
And it continues to impact the way we serve the public. So Project Empower is intended to resolve that. And I want to take this in two pieces. From an insured point of view, the insured person will have a portal, their own portal, just similar to the portals that you have with your financial institutions. And from that portal, you can and will transact all business with the NIB. So if you wish to submit a claim, you sign into your portal, you will submit your claim. First of all, once you enter certain information into the portal will recognize you and it will confirm that you are who you are. Some of the information will be pre-populated because it's your portal. So as you know, in the first page of any form, you would normally see date, name, date of birth, etc. That will be pre-populated. So we move really into what you're here for. Are you here for a sickness benefit, a maternity benefit, a retirement benefit? You will then upload the information or the information that is required to complete the form. Complete the form, attach the remaining information, and click Submit. Once you click Submit, Chairman, that is actually replaces what you do right now in the service center. So from a claim submission point of view, you will be using your portal. If you wish to get a contribution statement, you will go into your portal, the information will be available, so you will actually be, for the first time, you will have real-time information available to you to confirm that your employer has been paying contributions for you. That's just two of the many services that will be available, Chairman, from the insured portal. So when we look at claim submission via the personal portal, Chairman, it will impact and positively improve the claim processing time because naturally now the file is moving digitally through the organization. And accessibility, Chairman, there will no longer be a need for you to wait between the hours of 8 to 4, Monday to Friday, to submit a claim. You can do that 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, from anywhere in the world.
If I may, just one quick question. So I'm going back to the biodata, what I essentially would call the biodata page. I have one of those surnames that people love to misspell. So what happens if I try to log into my biodata page, to my portal, and my surname is misspelled? How do I correct that?
So on the registration to use the portal, you will have to enter your national insurance number and your name in order for it to be validated. In the event that your name is misspelled or by marriage you change your name, Those forms are available on your website. So all activities, all forms, change of name, change of address, submission of claims, checking your contribution statements, knowing whether your claim has been approved or not, all those are available on the portal.
But it's not a change of name, it is a data quality issue. So the data that has been entered is incorrect. How do I, as the insured person, make that correction? What is the process? Is it that I now have to visit the office and wait or something like that? So how do you correct that? So it's not a change of anything, it's just that the data quality, and we're going to encounter, and even in your report, data quality is going to be a challenge in terms of this transition. How do we address those data quality issues?
So in the event that your name is misspelled, customer care is available to you. You could submit a query and it will come back with a response of the information that you need to submit to have it corrected.
In what kind of time frame?
The time frames that we are looking at is significantly shorter than what it would have been before. With the new system, certainly we are not looking at a turnaround time beyond 2 weeks. However, with new systems, keeping in mind, Chair, I note that, remember, information submitted must be validated. While persons will submit information to the NIBTT, due diligence on identification is critical to ensure that persons are given access to their correct portal, as this is tied to contributions and allows you to submit claims which will be allowed based on those numbers of contributions. While the time frame in the initial we are putting out to be fair to customers, we must also transition our staff to new systems to be able to learn them and operate them and adjust and improve as we go along. And setting customer expectations is important, as it lends to customers coming back and asking, when will this be returned?
Okay, so my question is, how soon will my name be corrected on the system? So the error is not mine. My surname is my surname. The data entry has, and it has happened to me personally, on several occasions. Somehow people think that the S on my name is simply there for color. How soon will that be corrected? And this is something that is real. So I understand the point about name change by marriage and you have to come, but I'm saying in the data entry process, if there is an error, so if someone enters my number, because the data entry is from the NIB's end, yes? So if someone enters an 8 instead of a 3, because these things happen, how soon is that error going to be corrected? Because I might try to go into my system and I'm entering ABCD3 because that is the number in my national insurance number. But on the system, it is inadvertently, and it was inadvertently entered as 8. So you're saying I can submit a claim saying I can't get onto my system. What is the turnaround time for correcting that?
Within 3 to 5 days.
All right, okay, so to our listening and viewing public who may be tech savvy and may be able to access the system when it becomes available, between 3 to 5 days to have those things corrected. And I think I saw some hands going up. I recognize Member Citran and followed by Member Manning.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, and good morning to everyone. So I'll just like to build off of the Chair's point in that there may be some sort of error that may be inputted into the system. And having said that, I recognize the need to digitize the system. It's the same issues that we face at the Ministry of Health. But the question is to Ms. Persad-Poliah. And earlier we heard that, the NIBTT would be involved in issues of fact, and the courts would be involved in issues of interpretation. And given that NIBTT is so closely related to NIBTT, why weren't they consulted with regards to Empower, the implementation of Empower, and have they been consulted since? And what other stakeholders have been consulted thus far with regards to the implementation of Empower?
So, member, an actual meeting has not yet been held with NIBTT. I know that we did attempt to do that, but due to exigencies of office, we have not yet been able to actually meet with NIBTT to share the product. But we have actually been reaching out to many stakeholders. In fact, we have reached out to all our ministries, all our PSs, and as many employers as we can through chambers and other large bodies, TTMA, chambers, etc. So we have been communicating with as many employers and employer bodies as we can. The actual meeting with the NIBTT actually hasn't happened yet. I know I did say to Ms. Carrington that I would have done that between the last meeting and today's meeting, but it is now shared. I'm asking if we can probably look to do that as soon as possible.
Because I'm seeing like phase 1 has been implemented since 2024.
Phase 1, member, is an internal module.
The human
it's
resources,
HCM module, and similarly with phase 2 is our finance fusion, again an internal facing module. So phase 3 is our public facing module.
And when is that intended to be implemented?
As of right now, member, I'm hoping that within the next couple of months that we'll be able to roll out the full solution to the nation.
So hopefully we'll have a consultation with NIBTT before then.
Absolutely. I give you my commitment.
Member Manning.
Hi, good morning, everyone. 2 questions for the listening public. What has been the cost of this Empower program to date, and what's the expected final cost? Also, has it increased or decreased the need for CSRs, or by what degree? Thank you.
So if I can give you some guidance, on page 6 of your submission to the committee, you provide some costing, so I want to give you that as a starting point, yes. But I think Member Manning's question extends beyond the information provided, but this is a starting point for you.
So, Chairman, yes, I would have reported to the committee that the actual cost paid to date to the vendor for the solution, and this is as at February 2026, stands at approximately $143 million plus VAT, with annual maintenance fees of $50 million plus VAT and recurring annual maintenance fees of US $2.9 million. Chairman, in the broader context, so that is the cost paid to date for the solution. There are future liabilities that are due to the vendor in the amount of $50.9 million, which is as at June.
Which currency? Because your currencies are mixed up, because you have some US, you have some TT. So 50 million additional?
50 million TT.
TT. And the recurring maintenance. So annual maintenance is about, TT dollars, since we're using TT as a common currency here. So it's about 21 million TT dollars.
Yes. Would you like me to repeat it, Chair?
Please, yes, if you could, and if we can use TT as a common factor so that we have clarity in terms of the cost of this. So the cost to date, yeah.
So, Chairman, the cost paid to date to the vendor, and this is a cost as at February 2026 for the solution implementation of Empower, stands at TT 143 million plus VAT of 10.3 million, with annual maintenance costs of TT 50 million plus VAT of 3.5 million, and a recurring annual maintenance cost, Chairman, of approximately 18 million.
I was just about to ask that. Member Citron, you want to pose a question?
Thank you very much, Chair. So what is the difference between an annual maintenance cost, which is $50 million, and a recurring annual maintenance cost of US $3 million?
Right. So I'll hand over to my head of technology for that. But I would have, when I spoke to the 50 million, Chair, I would have spoken to the costs that have already been paid. So I would have grouped the maintenance cost that has been paid, and then going forward, there's annual maintenance costs going forward. But I'll hand over to technology to confirm.
Chair, that is correct. The cost that has been paid for annual maintenance, being annual, as at February 2026, is $50 million, but it would have been at a rate of approximately $3 million, the 18 million per year going forward. Keeping in mind that the solution has been operating within NIBTT as at August 2022. If
I may, Member Manning, I don't know if that's where you were going, but August 2022, the Empower has been part of the NIB's systems, right? I mean, at different phases. So internally, and then you're rolling it out. And no conversation has been had with NIAT since then? Is that what we're understanding? That NIAT has not been part of these conversations since 2022?
So when the solution was first, and the vendor was first engaged, the first cost of maintenance comes from a licensing perspective, where the licenses needs to be accessed to allow us to configure and develop the solution. Yeah.
My question was, and I understand how these things, you have to pay before you start to use it. You have to pay some funds. But my question wasn't about that. I was circling back to an issue I think raised by Member Sicharan, and just for clarity, Empower has been on the books, part of the NIB conversation, the digital transformation conversation since 2022, correct? Yes? So if I can circle back to Member Sicharan's question, 2022 to 2026, 4 years later, has NIAT, the tribunal, as one of the key stakeholders and key partners of the NI, albeit an independent organization, a key stakeholder of the NIB in service of the people of Trinidad and Tobago, has the tribunal been onboarded, for want of a better word, or introduced to this solution in terms of how it is meant to help increase efficiency in terms of the NIB's operations?
So, Chair, the NIAT is one of our many stakeholders. And it is only at this point, in terms of the third phase of this solution, that we are now moving into the outward to actually address the public. So NIAT is one of our many stakeholders, and this is a solution for the operations of the NIB. So they will be consulted with, but Chair, at this point, it will really be in terms of getting them onboarded to understand what the solution is and how it can bring efficiencies back to us.
I see many of the committee members have questions. So if I may, I recognize I will go back to Member Sicharan, Member Batiste, Member Dan Paul, and Vice Chair Maraj.
Thank you very much, Chair. It's just that it's such a large capital expenditure that the NIBTT has committed to. I mean, I'm seeing at least $150 million spent already. And to now be not even consulting with the NIAT, and you have already committed to this software, because it's basically software, right? And there's organizational change in that, you are moving forward with it. So what input would NIAT have at this point in time?
So, Chairman, the Empower solution is an NIB solution. It changes out our hardware, our software, the transmission of our operations. So
but I'm sure you'll agree, and I understand, I think I understand where you're going. It is to help with internal processes and efficiencies, but ultimately it is to support the people of Trinidad and Tobago. So it's not a static thing. It's not NIB. It is NIB in service of the people of Trinidad and Tobago. And I think the question is, if efficiency is what we're after by this digital transformation, and efficiency coupled with some decision-making processes, some internal processes are what oftentimes leads claimants or appellants to the tribunal, then it would seem, I think the question is, why wasn't a key stakeholder such as the NIAT even consulted from 2022 to now, and as of 2026, they still have not been consulted. But I mean, it's a larger conversation, and I know that, as I said, there are a number of members around the table. Minister Batiste, I know you wanted to ask a question.
It's just a follow-up, Chair, because the conversation could give a migraine from where I sit. We keep using the word solution, and I thought it was a solution in respect to customer service, in summary. And I would have expected that if you wanted to get a barometer of customer service in the context of NIB's customer service to the population, a good place to start would be NIBTT, because the customers are expected to go to NIBTT if they have concerns with decisions made in respect of them. But even what is more mind-boggling from where I sit is the notion of spending money, embracing a product almost on a piecemeal basis, where the end result is how it impacts the customer. And again, the key stakeholder from where I sit, as it relates to how NIB impacts the customer by legislation, would be NIBTT. So I am concerned about what is the reasoning behind, and the compartmentalizing of, well, I have not reached there yet. So what if we have spent all this money, and then when we engage with NIBTT and the concerns of the customer, NIBTT says that this is not going to help? What then? How do we reconcile the decision-making process that we are spending all this money without treating with what appears to be the key stakeholder in getting a sense of how the customer feels about the service of NIB? Chair.
Thanks for that, Member Sicharan. If I may, before I hand over to Member Dan Paul, if I may ask for, as part of the follow-up, if I can ask for a report on the stakeholders with whom you've met to date, and what has been the feedback in terms of those consultations that you may have had with various stakeholders. We know that as of today's date, you've not met with NIBTT, but if you can share with us a written response in terms of the stakeholders with whom you've met, and what is the feedback. And I do note in your report that there is still, I think, in terms of phase 3, you said 86% of phase 3 has been completed as of June the 30th, 2026, and phase 3 is titled Transforming Customer Experience. So if you can share with us, we give you the opportunity to provide us with something in writing in terms of which stakeholders have been consulted and what has been the feedback. Dan Paul?
Thank you very much, Chairman, and through you to the Executive Director. Your report, you stated, obviously, as mentioned before, the cost. But the report is very silent on how the vendors were selected. And you keep using the word vendor, but I am thinking also vendors, plural, because I don't know if it's the same vendor for the Oracle Insurance Policy Administrative System, the same vendor for the Customer Relationship Management. Is that the same vendor? Or they're different vendors?
So the procurement of the solution went through the process of open to identify a number of companies to provide the solution. The number of companies, I believe, was over, I think it was about 22 companies were invited to bid for the project. 2 vendors bid. One company was successful. While this one company to deliver the solution has engaged subcontractors, the NIB focuses its attention on the contractor to whom we have engaged to deliver the solution. So the primary vendor who delivers it has, in their delivering the solution, multiple vendors that they lean on.
Who's the primary vendor?
The primary vendor is Fujitsu Caribbean Limited. There are multiple vendors to deliver the solution, and we operate the contract through Fujitsu as they engage their third-party vendors along the project schedule.
And just a follow-up. Let me just find a question. I want to come to the gap you spoke about, Chairman.
Certainly.
86%.
Yeah, that's right, yeah.
given that the report also says that the project is under review, and then quoting from your report, right, and awaiting certain approvals as of June 30th, 2026, what specifically is under review? And does the stated July to September 2026 go-live target remain realistic given these lagging components?
So, member, the project itself is under review. So, you may be aware that we do have a board of directors at the NIB. It is a fairly new board of directors, and the project is under review by the board, and management has asked for certain approvals to advance the project, and we await those approvals.
Certain approvals, such as?
So, member, in terms of costs, so the project is under review by our board of directors. Management has advanced certain additional costs to our board to be able to complete the project, and that is under consideration by our board and our minister.
Well, I'm just thinking this through. 150 million plus VAT, plus. What do you expect to be your return on investment on this? What's the savings possible? Or what is going to be generated?
So if I may, if I can help. So we have the manual system that we spoke about in terms of the date where we started. So we've spent 150 million plus, including foreign exchange, because I figure that's why some of the figures were quoted in US dollars. So they're local vendors and they're overseas vendors, yes? Yes, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. What are the efficiencies that you expect to gain in terms of communicating with claimants, et cetera, et cetera? If you can just walk us through how this is meant to be. I think it's member Batista made the point about it being a solution. How is this going to get us to close some of those gaps and to address some of those inefficiencies and the customer service challenges that we've been seeing? If you can just walk us through what is how the solution is meant to help us in that sense and bring a return on the investment to the people of Trinidad and Tobago.
Sure.
Yes, you can go ahead and then I'll take the follow-up questions, yes.
Sure. So when this project and the idea of this project was initiated, through support of a vendor, the idea of the solution was brought about and value to be attained by the solution was documented. It was to be achieved in terms of business value back to the organization, in terms of a percentage reduction in complaints, improved turnaround times to our customers, for internal staff, reduction of queries, reports to union, improvements in our health and safety. And so the value that is being attained and the return on investment for the organization as a social organization that provides service to our customers is to be delivered by percentages, which has been documented.
By NIB or by the vendor?
In consultation, workshops were held to determine the return on investment was determined to be valued, and we could submit that in writing because it's an itemized list of things that would have been submitted by the vendor.
Thank you so much for anticipating that request, yes.
Yes. It is actually that value to be attained that led to the crafting of what the solution should look like prior to the issuance and development of the RFP. So to your point, member, the value to be returned is broken down by each business unit that participates in the solution, and we could submit that in writing to you.
And those conversations with the vendor, I don't want to belabor the point, but I think it's important. If I'm a vendor, I will tell you what I think will work best for you. But unless you've had the consultation among your key stakeholders, then you wouldn't have that cross-fertilization of ideas in terms of what solution might work best. So again, it would be useful for us to see that consultation report and how the persons and the agencies with whom you consulted actually had an opportunity to comment on the solution that was being proposed, so that we are clear that we're buying up or we have purchased a product that will redound to the benefit as opposed to something that we realize does not quite give us the anticipated return on the investment. I don't know, Senator Danpole, did you have a follow-up question?
No,
okay, all right. Member Sicharan?
Thank you very much, Chair. With regards to the Empower platform, how many staff are currently utilized or specifically assigned to it? And at the end of phase 3, how many staff do you need to have on board to use that system? And do you have enough staff?
So I'll want to pass this to my head of HR just to give some overall context in terms of the numbers that we're working with.
Sure. So in response to the first part of the question, as at June 30th, we had roughly over 55 persons who were reassigned to the Empower, actively working on the solution, involved in user acceptance testing. They have subsequently been returned as of July 1. In terms of how many staff we anticipate that will be required post full implementation of the solution, that is still being worked through at a very high level. Of course, we have preliminary ideas of what the structure would look like post implementation of the full solution, but we have yet to engage with our recognized majority union.
So 55 persons between 2022 and 55?
Yeah, 55.
For the last 4 years or so. Were these additional staff or were they from existing staff within the NIBTT?
These were existing staff from the NIBTT.
So with assigning these 55 persons towards this project, has that contributed in any way to the existing backlog that now currently exists with regards to claims or whatnot?
So while 55 persons were reassigned, it was not 55 persons for the duration of the project. So persons were reassigned intermittently, and I would say consecutively, roughly over the last 2 years, they would have been reassigned full-time. In terms of arrangements that we would have made internally to backfill, we would have used acting arrangements, and we also did bring on board an external contract vendor that provided external resources at the entry level of the organization.
So in the initial phases, this actually cost us more money. If you were bringing in external persons to do jobs that the staff that was assigned to Empower were now doing. Is that correct?
So let me put again some context, Chairman, right? So the NIB operates with about 650 employees. This project began on or about May of 2022 in earnest, and prior to that, of course, we would have engaged with many consultants along the way in terms of developing our benefit realization plan, etc. But it actually kicked off in May of 2022. In terms of the reassignment of staff, that actually would only have occurred within the last 2 years when we were at what we call the user acceptance testing of the product. So while persons would have been working with the Empower team before, the actual movement of persons from the service center into the testing room would only have occurred within the last 2 years. Just to put some context into that, and it is about 50 persons. In further answer, though, yes, we did support our operations because we recognize that we are a service industry and we needed to complement those that we would have removed out of the service center. So we did do internal arrangements in terms of acting arrangements, etc. And then we would have engaged a recruitment agency to bring in some entry-level positions to further support and bolster the service that we provide to the public while we complete the testing of our solution. In terms of the cost, remember, naturally, the cost that I would have revealed to that I would have shared to the committee would have been the cost paid to date for the vendor, And there would have been costs along the way. This is not just a technology project. This is a full transformation project. So yes, I can report to you, Chair, and I will prefer to do that in writing. I can report to you on the additional costs that would have been incurred outside of the actual vendor cost. We would have engaged in terms of administrative expenditure, in terms of persons acting, persons coming into the service center. That would have been a cost. Naturally, on this transformational journey, we would have had to have engaged key partners, for example, for our SMS messaging system. We would have incurred a cost there. Our e-commerce platform, which is the platform that the employers will be utilizing through their portal to effect payment. We have an e-commerce platform payment. Marketing and branding, Chairman, naturally this product needs to be marketed and public needs to be made aware of it. So there are elements of costs outside of the vendor cost that we have incurred, and I'll be happy to report that to you, Chair, in writing.
So I'm not trying to bash digitization. I'm just trying to figure out the implementation that has gone on here. So for the last 4 years and considerable capital input, what beneficial outcomes and 2 phases out of the 3 Empower program has been implemented? What beneficial outcomes has the NIBTT seen over the last 4 years?
Chairman, my head of technology will speak now.
Thank you.
Sure. With the implementation of the HR application in August of 2024, what we have seen is before the implementation of this application, our 16 locations, 14 service centers, and head office, as well as some back office departments, would have been engaging with HR through paper, through couriers back and forth for acting, vacation, leave. And the HR function was primarily administered through the same manila envelopes, folders for employees for calculation of leave, benefits, and operations within the organization. With the implementation of the HCM solution, we have introduced what we call our staff portal, and our staff portal is now our hub of operations. All Empower applications now reside on this hub. Our staff log in digitally, clock in, clock out, and that is for regular hours as well as overtime. Pay slips are accessed digitally, job letters on demand, applications for leave done electronically, updating of qualifications and certificates, leave balances are live. What this speaks to is the establishment of operations that has reduced administrative burden on the HR department. It has centralized all our data into one space, and it has now improved the operations within the service centers for assessing what our human capital resources are and improve performance management.
So the next obvious question is, given NIBTT, is a delivery service, basically, why wasn't Phase 3 implemented first?
Phase 3, the implementation of Phase 3 did start alongside the other phases. The implementation of the Phase 3 is longer from a design configuration perspective. HR and finance being established operations are shorter developmental times. Their processes are known. The operations of our service centers, calculations for our claims, requirements for contributions is a significantly larger developmental phase. So while all phases started in stream, the discovery, the understanding of how our business operates, that phase was longer for the insurance operations. The configuration and design and the testing of these phases is longer. I do hope the committee appreciates that the calculation of claims, building those calculations, building the requirements takes significantly longer than the calculation of leave, which is simply, I have a certain number of leave and I use a plus and minus.
And I think you just answered one of the questions. I know Member Dan Paul and Vice Chair Maraj, they've been waiting patiently to pose questions, but I just wanted us to go back to the documentation you provided that says Project Empower is not simply an information technology upgrade. It is a comprehensive transformation of how the NIBTT operates, how it manages its data, how it serves employers, contributors, claimants, and beneficiaries. and it represents a deliberate shift from a legacy operating model characterized by manual processes, fragmented systems, and limited accessibility to a modern, integrated, and digitally enabled institution. And it seems to me that since the focus really is on improving service delivery, I must admit I'm a little concerned, coupled with the consultation question that arose earlier, and with the delivery time, if I remember correctly, September 2026 is meant to be your rollout date? Is that September? Did I imagine the September date?
No.
September is meant to be your rollout date.
The September date is in the document, but Chair, remember that I would have shared that the project is under review and awaiting certain approvals.
Okay.
So there may be, that date may shift depending on when all the approvals are received.
All right, okay, but I'll reserve the rest of the questions I have. Senator Dan Paul, you have a follow-up question, and then I want to ask Member Maraj to pose some questions. He's been patiently waiting to
Thank you, Chair, and through you. Chair, I have to admit, this annual maintenance of close to 75 million TT dollars, that's a lot. Do you have anything in place at the NIBTT to increase capacity building, to detach yourself from this cost, or even something like did the contract include technology transfer or anything else? Anything of such? Thank you.
So, remember before Amanda speaks, the cost, the annual maintenance cost is US 2.9 or the equivalent in TT. I know you would have used another figure that I wasn't sure. I just wanted to. Very well, okay. Okay.
Maintenance costs. 50 plus VAT was your crude as at February, but then there is a 2.96 million, well, $3 million US to be paid annually, yeah. So I think it's all of that member, it's 75 million that member Dan Paul was asking about.
So the answer is yes. There is a plan to upskill the department's technology team to be able to support the application going forward. It is part of the transformation and implementing modernized technologies. It means that we too also have to transform our staff and train them to support it. As the staff skill sets grows, the dependency on the vendor does decline, and we can move away from the vendor to provide the support.
What type of time frame are you looking at with this?
The time frame that we're looking at, currently we are with the vendor up until 5 years, and in the initial we expect to stay with the vendor in an initial 3 years while we retrain our staff and upskill them and have them start taking over control of the systems.
But what if the vendor doesn't want to update your system after 5 years?
Sorry, this is not a proprietary application that we are developing. There are other vendors in the market that provide support for the base database application that we are providing. Of course, changing vendors is not necessarily easy, but can be planned for, and the NIB is not at risk for vendor lock-in with this solution.
Member Sitaran.
Quick question, right? So the first two phases have been implemented and they're ongoing, being HR as well as finance. I have a document in front of me saying that the administrative expenditure of the NIBTT is roughly $286 million per year. So since implementation, has the administrative expenditure reduced, stayed stable, or increased?
Minister, Chairman, remember that it has remained relatively stable. Our admin expenditure for the year 2025, just give me 1 second, would have been roughly 300 million. And in the years gone by, it really ranges between 280 to 312 million.
So there was no beneficial cost in terms of implementing the Empower system with regards to these two very large administrative expenditures?
No, not at this time.
So you've not seen any benefit? Just yet?
Not just yet, because but the third phase must first roll out for us to be able to assume and see the actual full benefits of the system.
No, I think Member Sitran's question was on the internal processes. So you said HR and Mrs. Fulchan-Lakhan spoke to the details in terms of leave management, acting allowances, and all of these things. And I think Member Sitran's question was, having rolled out these two phases, which you've indicated were necessary as part of the internal processes, what has been the return on that? Have you seen greater efficiencies in terms of these areas? And have those efficiencies been reflected in cost reduction? Member Sitran, was that the question? Yes, okay. So that's the question. Not whether your admin costs have remained flat over the years, but having expended all of this money, it's not a small amount of money, having expended all of this money for these internal processes, which you said were necessary to lay the groundwork for then rolling it out to the public, that you needed to have these internal processes, what has been the return on the investment? And to my mind, and I think that is where Member Sitran was going, your internal costs should have gone down in those areas, and there should have been greater efficiencies realized. I mean, I don't want to anticipate your response, but that is, I think, what he's saying, that we're not seeing. So we're seeing costs going up because you're engaging the vendor, you're engaging costs for these X, Y, and Z, but your administrative costs have remained more or less flat. So really, your budget has been increasing when it's in truth and in fact meant to see some kind of dip in terms of the advances and the benefits from implementing the technological solution.
Yeah, but Chairman, the actual benefits will not be immediately realized.
Okay, all right, okay, that's reasonable. I wanted to ask Member Maraj, because he's been waiting in the wings for a long time. He had some questions to pose.
Thank you very much. I'm very impressed with your grasp and your knowledge of your core business. And I congratulate you for that. A lot of the questions I have been asked and answered, so I wouldn't repeat them. What was your original budget when you signed with these people? Well, basically, what was your original budget and original end date? Maybe you can answer both simultaneously.
Have there been cost overruns, project overruns?
I can report to you in writing on this, but in terms of the original budget for this project stood at approximately 164 million with an initial timelines of 18 months. But I would hasten to add—
18 months from 2022?
Correct, yes. I would hasten to add, though, that the original budget of 164 million was simply for hardware and software. It did not take into account all the additional activities that were required to bring the project to full fruition. So, for example, it didn't take into account our administrative expenditure, the engagement of all the consultants, project management, engagement of providers to support us with digitization, branding, marketing,
so is it that the project the scope of the project wasn't properly defined?
No, the scope of the project was defined, but the initial budget was confined to the solution, hence why it would have stood at 164 million.
Member?
Yeah. Now, maybe I misheard, but you said that there's the 50 million owed to the vendor at this point in time?
Yes, there are future liabilities of approximately 50.9 million, and that will be the figure as of June 2026.
Okay. Now, as you know, they pay people and they stop working. That's a risk, right? You have to pay them. I mean, first of all, there's a lot of money. Right? I think in my calculation, about 225 million has been spent already, right? And I'm not counting what is you pay other people. So that's probably 300 million. How is this funded? Is it funded internally from your collections? How is this funded?
It is funded internally from our contribution income and from our investment income.
So, but it goes back to the 50 million owed to the vendor. I would assume he's not amused. And will they continue? And I mean, if they say, you know what, I don't want to do business with you anymore, what's the risk of that? And these things happen. I come out of business, right? If you cannot pay the people, they're going to stop working. Is there a risk of that? And how do we mitigate that risk? I'm just taking a business perspective.
Sure. So the future liabilities is money owed to Fujitsu. The contract that was designed with Fujitsu is payment will only be issued to Fujitsu on delivery of certain items. So while there remains $50 million owed on the contract, Fujitsu will only be paid or due to be paid that amount when they have delivered within the final phases of the phase 3 of the solution.
Is there any dispute over that?
At the last approval of the contract, we had an agreement that payments across the waves would have been paid at 85% at the delivery of the go live, and then a 15% at the end of the maintenance period.
But you said you're going to the board for additional funding. Is that to settle this debt, or I'm just kind of missing something here?
Sorry, remember I wasn't quite sure. If we went to the board for?
Approvals for additional funding.
Correct, yes. The management
Okay, is it for the and to follow up on Member Maraj's question, if I understood it, the approvals that you're seeking from your board, are they for current liabilities or future liabilities?
So the management would have approached the board for an additional sum that would have been requested from our vendor to complete the project. So that will be in addition to the future liabilities that I would have mentioned before, Chairman.
Okay, so we really need to have a submission in writing, because I think all of these numbers are having me a little confused and discombobulated.
Chair, I would be happy to do that, because it's much to convey.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that, and I know that we're asking some questions that you perhaps didn't anticipate, because the numbers that were quoted in your submission appear to be just part of the funds that we're talking about for this project. But I know that some members have other questions, and I don't want us to lose the members of the public that we have online. So I want to ask a question that I think is that has been burning in my mind. I consider myself tech savvy, but we've spent all of these hundreds of millions of dollars. I think the listening and viewing public will understand that where there's 150, 200, 300, hundreds of millions of dollars have been spent, but yet we don't seem to have a line of sight on when this solution is going to benefit the average citizen who may walk into the NIBTT's offices. And we also don't seem to have proof of concept as yet that this is actually going to help with efficiencies in terms of the deliverables, service delivery to the people of Trinidad and Tobago, and that remains my concern. Can I have, to the best of your understanding, notwithstanding the outstanding liabilities that you may have to the vendor, the fact that we have a number of vendors involved, so you may have main vendors, but there are also subcontractors, et cetera, and as Member Murad said, sometimes the best laid plans, and I'm paraphrasing, the best laid plans could run awry, could go awry. What mitigation system do we have in place to ensure that at the end of the day, this investment is going to redound to the benefit of the people of Trinidad and Tobago? And can you give us a time frame within which the people of Trinidad and Tobago can go on to those who can, and that's another question I have. What is the transition? Where in your plan is there a transition for persons who are disabled, for example, who live in underserved communities, for example? So you have 14 centers throughout the length and breadth of Trinidad and Tobago. What is the plan where in your plan is the onboarding, the training for these persons? Because you spoke about the portal, and as I said, I consider myself tech savvy, and there are many persons out there who are, but there are also those persons who are trying to figure out what you're talking about a portal. Where is that training component part of these costs that we've been talking about, and what is the rollout period? Because again, I come back to the September date, notwithstanding the approvals that you're awaiting from your board, but September was identified as one of your dates. You identified September as your date, and we're in July. So in 2 months' time, you had initially identified that this would be rolled out to the public. Can you walk us through what is your training plan? What is your transition? How do I understand these things? How do I get access to a portal? What is your information dissemination plan and all of these things? Because you spoke about the marketing of Empower, but that doesn't translate into the user interface. How do I use this system? Where is that as part of your communication? So I know I've packed in a lot of things inside of that one question, and I do know that there will be an opportunity for you to provide us a written submission. But how does this significant investment redound to the benefit of the people of Trinidad and Tobago as at July the 2nd? And what is the time frame within which you see a benefit accruing to the people of Trinidad and Tobago, not the vendor? Because right now I'm just seeing vendor benefits.
Yeah,
the question now? Yes.
I just want to ask one quick follow-up. You had mentioned you had an 18-month, you're supposed to have rolled out in 18 months. This is 48 months now or more. What accounted for that?
Same line of question, Member Sitran.
Thank you, Chair. And it's building on the Chair's submission. I'm seeing here that you stated that the new portals are not fully compliant with accessibility standards, such as the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, WCAG 2.1. And given that accessibility for persons with disabilities is a legal and ethical obligation, what is the specific timeline for achieving WCAG 2.1 compliance, and what risks does non-compliance pose for persons with disabilities or others with access needs?
Maybe I can address Member Maraj's comments in terms of how did we move from 18 months to 48 months. And again, Chair, I would like to submit this in writing, but I will give 4 brief areas in terms of one would have been, the schedule would have been adjusted, of course, over time based on certain risks that were identified by our project management team and our lead technical consultant. 2, you may recall, Chair, that the NIB, there was a cyber attack on the NIB on or about December 2023 that led to certain delays. 3, we did have over time a new rollout plan to take into account how we treat with our insured persons, how we treated our employers, and the product was then being delivered instead of all at once. From a risk mitigation point of view, it was determined that the product ought to have been delivered in waves, so that we would have gone first with our HCM platform, then our finance platform, then converting our insurance operations IA to OIPA, which is our backbone basically. And then we would have gone into launching our insured portal, our employer portal, and then portal-to-portal connectivity. So in terms of the schedule was adjusted to accommodate less risk.
A revision of the projects.
Correct.
Of the project, yeah.
And then, of course, Chair, as we complete UAT, which is a user acceptance testing point of it, we have spent a little bit more time in the UAT phase, and that really was intended to ensure that the product that we were going to put on the market was an exceptional product. So there were many reasons for the extension, and I can provide that in more detail, Chair, to you in writing. Anything you want to add? I know there was another question.
The question in terms of the time frame on the return on the investment for the people. When is this going to benefit the people of Trinidad and Tobago in terms of greater efficiency and greater customer service delivery?
Right. Chair, I want to go back to the benefit realization document that initiated the project. That benefit realization document is really the root of how the solution has been developed. There are some core issues that we have known within the NIBTT, which the solution seeks to resolve. Things like turnaround times, quality of data, communication with our customers, and enriching our customer care department who engage with our customers to provide accurate and, I want to say, relevant information to our customers. Those were the core driving principles on how we developed the solution and how we redesigned our processes in order to deliver that. So there is a connectivity between what the organization intends to achieve from a business perspective coming out of these workshops to the solution. We are at a very, I want to call it a mature state with the Wave 2, which is the replacing of the core application. And for context, the replacing of the core application is significant. It brings with it our customer care CRM solution. It brings with it the e-payments portal. It brings with it the integration with our finance department, which for the organization of NIBTT brings the greatest value because it will be the time when the NIBTT will be taking data through the 184 statements contributions and validating it against payments. That allows us in real time to be able to know how compliant our customers are. It allows our customers to know whether or not contributions are being made for them. It allows us to check the data before it is submitted, which correcting of the data, as the ED would have mentioned, in terms of the quantity of data and records that we churn, on average every month we take in 10% errors. And that presents to the organization significant time as it relates to effort and overtime. When I say the solution has matured, we have actually trained our staff on how to do processing of claims in the organization from end to end. Our UAT percentage completion is at 96%, and the solution is available. It can be logged into, we can review it. We have seen the integrations in operations, and we are just at the last push to complete our UAT and do what we consider to do end-to-end testing, which means we'll be testing the solution in its completeness from receipt of claim to issuance of check or payment at the bank.
And with regards to the compliance accessibility standards?
So that compliance standard has a number of criteria which must be met. As with all standards, compliance to a particular standard takes a concerted review of the standards and applications into the system. While the solution has some components of it which is available, and some of these components are available natively through browsers, through enlarging screens, reading text. Those are available. But to say we are compliant with the standard holistically, we are unable to do so. Yeah.
But after such a large capital injection investment, is there any plans going forward to be fully compliant with regards to persons with disabilities? Because many of the persons that would access NIB services are disabled in some way.
Are disabled, and you're right. And yes, after this solution has been implemented, we will certainly look at compliance. And I want to go back to the standard and the number of criteria that must be met. We are not saying that the system is not compliant with most of the standard. What we are saying is that implementing this solution, redesigning the core applications within the NIBTT has to be done to establish the platforms. What we have ensured is that the tools and the platforms that we are using allows us to become compliant, and such efforts need to be planned and executed.
Is being compliant a legal requirement?
I cannot answer that.
All right. So what we'll do is that we'll give you the opportunity. There are a lot of questions that were coming at you, and I think through our parliamentary team, we're going to follow up with you to get some written responses to those questions. I think Member Manning had one question that he wanted to ask.
Thank you. I know that the NIB fund is, I think, the largest fund in the region, not so? About $30 billion assets under management. But still, wouldn't it have been, I guess, financially more prudent to float a bond to finance this project instead of just paying directly?
You read my mind, Member Manning, because if I permit me to add some flavor, some color to that question based on the submission in April. In April, we were told that the benefits paid are about $6.6 billion against collection of about just under $5 billion. So it seems to me that if you're already realizing a shortfall between what you receive and the benefits paid, you're dipping into that fund. Is it that you're dipping into that same shortfall fund to finance this project, as opposed to, so if you can clarify that.
200 billion plus is significant.
If you can clarify that question for us.
Chairman, there are certain restrictions in the National Insurance Act that would prohibit us or restrict us from doing what the member would have suggested.
From floating a bond?
Correct, yes.
All right, perhaps it's something.
I'm happy to look at it. I mean, that's my understanding.
Sure, but again, if you can,
we are prohibited from doing that, but I'm happy.
If you can again provide us with that in writing, in terms of, because it might be something that legislatively. Now, if I may, and I don't want anyone to leave, either our viewing or listening audience, or certainly the officials who are here with us. This is not an interrogation or a firing squad. What we're trying to do is to ensure, as is our remit as the Joint Select Committee Finance and Legal Affairs, that we get perhaps the best value, social value for the people of Trinidad and Tobago in terms of investments and expenditures undertaken. And our questions really are in that vein. Empower has been identified as a solution to improve efficiencies to the people of Trinidad and Tobago. And I think with the information provided to us in terms of the hundreds of millions of dollars spent to date, as well as the shortfalls and the challenges that NIB faces in terms of payments as opposed to the revenues that you earn, it is really trying to have a meeting of the minds to understand what perhaps are some of the solutions that we can identify to address some of the challenges that you face. So I hope that our comments are taken in that spirit. And I don't want any of our viewing public viewing or listening public to inadvertently see this. I do have a concern, however, in terms of when this solution is likely to redound to the benefit of the average citizen, including our disabled and other vulnerable members of the population of Trinidad and Tobago who look to the NIB for support in terms of the remit that you required. Now, I know that the chairman of NIBTT, she has been waiting a long time. I saw notes and that sort of thing, but I didn't want to I didn't want to disrupt the course of the conversation. So, as part of your closing comment, Ms. Carrington, if I can ask you to respond to any of the issues that we have raised, and in terms of the information shared by the NIBTT team from your perspective.
Chair, thanks for the opportunity. It really was a concern to us that Empower has started being rolled out and consultation did not take place. And we would have reached out a couple of times to ensure that we were part of the conversations. Yes, because we too do believe that we are one of the major stakeholders. So I look forward to the conversation with NIBTT to see how Empower can help certainly reduce the number of appeals filed, to improve the process in us sharing information, because relevant information is shared each time an appeal is filed. We have a benefit unit file that must pass to NIBTT, and it's a lot of paper being printed and shared for each member. So one of the suggestions I had back in 2022, I think when I started this, was that we had a portal through which we can share and receive information that is used by either party. So I am hopeful that this opportunity can be presented through Empower. it also would allow persons to allow the appeal process to be a lot speedier. One thing I want to mention too that was noted by the ED was that on the disallowance notice, and I agree, there is a note to remind persons that they can file an appeal if they're in a disagreement. But is that included on all decisions? Because not only when you disallow, a person would appeal. A person could be dissatisfied with the quantum of a benefit in terms of not just retirement, but in terms of disability, the degree of disability granted, that will determine how much you qualify for. So that maybe in all decisions going out from NIBTT, there should be a line giving the citizen an option to file an appeal if they're in disagreement with it. So in closing, I would want to remind employees that it's important to retain employment records, retain medical records as well, because one thing we didn't touch on is the fact that we also treat with issues of fact that relate to medical claims, invalidity, disabilities as well, where we have disability grants. So that it's important they keep their records. It's important that employers also be reminded of their obligations, and in NIBTT, I ask that to remember to do audits on employers on a timely basis so that records can be updated, because time and time again, you have persons coming in to file a claim and the employer has long flown the coop, or the records no longer exist, and employees themselves didn't keep copies of these records, or if they kept copies of the record, NIBTT still needs to validate it. So there's no employer there. There's no record, and NIBTT didn't complete the audit in a timely fashion, because by the time I'm about to retire and file a claim, and I worked for over 30, 40 years, and those initial employers have lost their records, the onus is on the employee whose memory isn't always there. The ability to do an affidavit to get someone to validate that they were within that employee sometimes is impossible. So we implore the employers, the employees to do their part to ensure that records are kept. We also ask employers who are listening to remember that there are timelines in terms of completing the application forms. The employee will come at a form and the employer has a part to complete. And where they don't complete those things on time, many times the employee is disadvantaged and unable to access the claim because it didn't take place within that window for filing of that claim. So we look forward to the recommendations, the solutions coming out of this session. I think a lot was discussed that can be important to improving the life and livelihood of citizens of TNT in accessing benefits in accordance with the National Insurance Act.
Thank you, Ms. Carrington. You raise the issue of audits of employers and the timeliness of those audits, etc. And again, it is hoped that Empower is likely to improve the efficiency and the timeliness of these, so there will be the closing of that gap and closing of some of these issues that can affect claimants and, of course, appellants. Mrs. Persad-Poliah, I would like to give you the opportunity to make some closing remarks.
Thank you, Chairman. I want to give the committee the assurance that we will meet with NIAT in the coming days. And, Chairman, I would be happy to report to you on the outcome of that meeting, because I'm confident that the solution that Empower brings will meet with NIAT's satisfaction. So Ms. Carrington and I will meet in the coming days on that and report back to you. Chair, as we close, we wish to assure the public and the committee that phases 1 and 2 were completed, have been implemented, and is successful. Phase 3 is, we are excited to bring to you phase 3. That is the public-facing portion of the solution. It will bring to you portals, your insured portal and your employer portal, from which you will conduct business with the NIB. It will naturally deliver faster, more accessible service. It will make our services even more transparent, and it will align to the needs of our customers. As I close, I would want to remind our employers that the employer portal remains open. Thus far, Chairman, we have onboarded approximately 1,400 employers, successfully onboarded 1,400 employers. They'll be the first ones in when the portal is open to be able to conduct their business with the NIB via the portal. So I urge employers to come on board with us, and the information is available via our website. Our Employer Empower Hub is on our website. And stay tuned, basically, Chairman, because the portals will be coming, information will be shared, and we'll be happy to roll it out to the nation. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that, Mrs. Persad-Poliah. And it would be remiss of me if I didn't bring, as we close the session, as we're about to close the session, a question from a member of the public, and if I may be allowed to read it. One of the objectives of the recent NIB amnesty that was extended to August the 2nd, 2025, was to encourage unregistered employers to join NIB and become compliant and start contributing. However, although I registered and paid my principal contributions, I was still required to pay penalties and interest. Should these have been waived under the amnesty, and will there be any consideration for waiving penalties and interest registrations completed before the August 2nd, 2025 deadline? And we can ask the team to provide you with this question and the member of the public who submitted the question so that you will have the opportunity. I have to say that I'm excited that you're excited to provide us with information, because based on today's conversation, and I think all of the questions around Empower and its rolling out and how it's really meant to transform the way in which NIB engages with the people of Trinidad and Tobago, I think I should alert you that the committee is likely to continue our engagement with NIBTT when we resume in September, because the Parliament goes on recess, so that we can catch our breath. Our committee support teams can pull together all of the reports based on the initial conversations that we've had with you. So we are likely to ask you to rejoin us in September when we resume, and we want to look at the question of the sustainability. I think some of those issues have been raised this morning, but we want to look at the issue of the actuarial reviews, the retirement age, the issue of what you receive as opposed to what you pay out. And then we were told this morning that included with, well, in addition to the almost $5 billion in payouts, there are these capital costs that also come out of the same pot. So I think when we resume in September, we would want to have some of those conversations to help understand what are some of the issues related to sustainability. So again, we can ensure that NIBTT grows and continues to grow and to thrive, so that we can provide service, continue to provide service to the people of Trinidad and Tobago. In closing, I wish to thank the officials from the NIBTT, from the NIAT, the National Insurance Appeals Tribunal, and the Ministry of Finance. We've not had reason to call on our colleague from the Ministry of Finance, but I'm sure she's been tuning in and listening to the proceedings. I wish to thank you all for your contributions to today's inquiry. I wish to thank my committee members for their support and their active participation, and of course I always wish to thank the staff of the Office of the Parliament for their procedural, for their research and logistic support, all the things that happen behind the scenes. And I also wish to thank the listening and viewing public of Trinidad and Tobago for your continued engagement. Please feel free to send us a comment on any of our social media platforms. Submit your questions. If there is something that we raised today that you wish to have further clarification on, send it in to us, and we will continue to communicate with our stakeholders at the NIBTT and the National Insurance Appeals Tribunal. So with those few words, I wish to bring this inquiry to a close and to thank you for your attention today.